What is going on, you guys? It's your boy, Compulsive Crafter here, and we are back with episode 121 of the video game therapy series. I am not quite tired of the shaders yet, so they're going to stay on for the time being. But I am going to do something monotonous today. I'm just going to mine some sand. But anyway, yeah. I am a compulsive crafter, I would say that, but I have kind of lamented how I haven't been able to just get back into games. There's not quite the magic there was. Maybe it's just a childhood thing and it's a part of a maturation process. But I don't necessarily think video games themselves are an entirely even immature hobby. I think there are dimensions of it that are, I guess, arguably intellectual. And given that the majority of what people do anyway, even that it even isn't considered a pointless hobby, is pointless. It doesn't seem that stupid to be wasting, your quote unquote intelligence on chess. Like for example, not even chess. Chess was the example I was going to use. I just, my mouth jumped the gun there. For example, like chess. I guess one could argue that chess is like a childish hobby, but it certainly is like intellectual. It requires a lot of thinking, and there's a lot of problem solving involved. And even if it is like maybe a childish hobby, you could call it that. It's certainly not one that's useless and is should be frowned upon. And I think the more I guess permissive on those would say that chess isn't a childish hobby, even though it is technically a game. And just because it's a game doesn't mean it's a hobby. Because you can call professional athletes, children for playing games, but they're certainly not children in the eyes of. Certainly don't feel like children. I think it's also, I would even argue childish to assume that because it's not like nuclear physics research. Like if that's what you're not using your intelligence for, then you're being a child and you have a childish hobby. Because at the end of the day, it's like besides like trying to expand the, I'll say just like the intelligence of mankind, is that really the only thing that isn't a childish hobby? Like the rest of it is all like, in one way or the other, you could view it as you could trivialize it as like a pointless thing to do. And you can even say that about really anything. I suppose the physical games have less. There's less of a counter argument in my view because there's nothing immature about being in good shape. So, if like basketball, for example, is your hobby, I was playing basketball today. You can't really argue that it's like you're a baby, because you're like grow up. Like, I'm staying in shape. What do you mean grow up? Like this is a perfectly adult thing to do, is to find something to keep yourself in shape. Like so what? It's like a game in some sense, but like anything is kind of a game. Running or even like lifting weights is still all kind of a game. Now you can I guess do it without gamifying it. But again, at that point, I think you lose a lot of the results that you get from gamifying it. But I do think it's I don't know. Not to say that it's rampant that people are being judgmental about what people do with their hobbies, but there is even an inkling within me to I guess judge a person based off of like what maybe like the perceived maturity of their hobby. So like I suppose it like if you're a so suppose you have a mature career and you're a particle physicist or something like that, because that's like a smart thing to do and you're benefiting humanity or whatever by doing that. Of course, then you have like a childish hobby, which is like playing chess, which is like, well, kids do that, and you're not like adding anything to society. You're just playing a game. You're a child. Grow up. I'm not even like about like being a child, but just like the level of maturity of said activity. But I think it's kind of difficult in this day and age to not be able to view. This kind of comes back to my whole like reductionist versus holism argument that I talked about last time, where if you view anything through any a particular lens, you can trivialize anything and make it seem silly. Like the example I used last time was like marriage. You can make marriage look silly if you're if you view it from the lens of like we're just biological monkeys running around. And sure, like dressing up and dancing around, and everyone wears white, or the person wears white, and everyone's clapping and dancing, and there's this ceremony where someone reads a book. Like all of that, if you take it completely out of context, seems like a ridiculous thing for people to like. Again, grown adults to be doing is sitting around. Everyone's all dressed up. They all came out here, and now they're just reading out of a book and saying that whatever, like making empty promises to people, which again is not the way I would view marriage. I don't think that's obviously not the way I think it is, and I don't view it as like an immature thing. And sure, as an abstraction, it seems silly that like everyone just plays dress up and for an hour. But understandably, there's in many more contexts that isn't a silly game. So in the same vein, like chess being like, well, a child plays chess and it's like a little party game, whatever. You're kind of dismissing a lot of the effort and intelligence that goes into it. So I guess to extend that to absolve myself of the criminality that I'm posing here, Minecraft 2 has a lot of maybe more technical things, and there is a certain I'll even say like dedication or I don't know, pursuit that one must have to be able to. I mean, I don't know. I'm just trying to justify the fact that I don't think it's a child's thing to be doing to be, talking to yourself playing Minecraft. It probably is, but again, viewed any you can whatever your hobby is, whoever's being critical of me, I'm sure I could figure out a abstraction to make you seem like an idiot, and vice versa. So it's like, okay, well, is the point of this just to like make each other feel dumb because of what they spend their time doing? It's like, well, no. All that to say, I still do think there is maybe, again, maybe some value judgment to be had on that. And obviously that requires uh, nuance and is on a case by case basis. But I do think there is like, if you're a grown man and your hobby is collecting My Little Pony dolls or something and watching, I don't even know what's Sesame Street. Okay. I think I can make a stronger argument that what you're doing, I will say, is immature, or you're heavily autistic or something, which I guess is excusable then. But uh, versus like me playing Minecraft, because I think I could argue that Minecraft is technical. You could even argue that other games like I don't even know what people play anymore, Rocket League or chess or something, have different like elements of like, even like kind of hand skill or knowledge about the game and the mechanics of the game that make it, again, a more intellectually stimulating activity where, like porn watching or like porn collecting is probably not like something I would say is, highbrow hobby, right? So I do still think there is some we can have some comparison of hobbies and where they fall in terms of like, should this be what you're doing with your time? And the other side of this argument is like, well, who really cares what anyone's doing all the time? There shouldn't be any judgment so long as like you get your job done. But I would argue that many people's jobs are stupider than my hobbies. You know what I mean? Like, if instead of going to work and doing what you did what I do and just play and you played Minecraft for an hour and talked to a camera, appreciably nothing would change about the world, right? And that's unfortunately true for most of you, actually. If nothing happened, if no cold call insurance calls were made today, if there wasn't any of that, nothing would happen, and there wouldn't be any. People would still have food, the shelter. Nothing would happen, really, nothing. And yet, in this case, I've accomplished playing an hour of Minecraft and you've sat at a desk. It is not to debrate people that have real jobs. Of course, you could say, well, I make money with this. There are lots of people that make money, again, playing Minecraft or doing, quite literally brainless, like podcast comedies. And then, like, then the argument is like, well, as long as you're making money, then no one can say anything, which I also think is kind of a tough argument to make, you know, because then there's also no bounds on like what is like an acceptable way to make money, which I think should be a conversation that we need to have as a society. What is an okay thing to do to make money? And this is supposed to be covered by the legal system, but let's be honest, they're like 40 years behind on anything. So I don't really trust them to make the moral judgment calls until it's too late. So because culture and technology is all moving very very fast, we should set our own boundaries about what is an okay thing to do to do for a living, for example. And I think many people, obviously, this is where like the big moralistic arguments come into play. Like if you're a evangelical Christian, you're gonna start berating the OnlyFans chicks or something. And honestly, there's nothing wrong with making money. I'll say using your body, but to me that does feel not even immature. It just kind of feels, uh, morally queasy. I'll say, which is maybe true for a lot of other people that make money, especially even like, if you make your money, selling bogus insurance, which again is an arguable thing. It's like, is this insurance bogus? Well, technically not. There's nothing outright bogus about this, but like at the same time, it's like, come on. Come on, let's be honest here. That's no one needs this. Which like that I would say is again crosses a line. But then who draws that line? Obviously, legal system has to, I guess, defend the people who are truly like maybe like well-intentioned insurance people, or if it's a paper company, they're well-intentioned, or again, whatever example you want to use, we have to assume that they're very, very well-intentioned, knowing full well that they're not. It's like they find a child predator with 40 terabytes of child porn on his hard drive, and he's like, well, that isn't mine. It's like, dude, come on, like we know it's yours, it's like, but there's no like actual physical evidence that ties him to the hard drive. So it's like, all right, well, he has to go. He has like we have to let him go. But like like it's bullshit. All right, obviously it's this guy's stuff. It's kind of that thing where it's like the legal system makes those judgments, but socially, I think people should perhaps make their own judgments on things and be like, well, this is not right. X, Y, Z. So, um, I don't know. I guess I'm not even gonna. Maybe I could list out like things people do for money, but I would think most of them I think would be in the wrong category for me. But I mean, maybe it's a conversation that you have with yourself, and you ask yourself not even what you're doing now, but what other people will do. What constitutes a moral or immoral way of making money? Because even like people that work at big tech companies, because on many hands you can't really fault them. Because again, in the eyes of society, they are working for a big company that quote unquote like provides services or whatever. They make a shit ton of money. They have maybe in the case of some companies, they have a good work life balance. They're doing all the things. They're doing something that's, again, highly intellectual. They're working with algorithms. Maybe they're an AI researcher at Google or something, which, again, is a very prestigious job to have. Which, by the way, is it prestigious or prestigious? I don't know. I started saying prestigious, but I feel like that makes me sound snobby. So maybe I should stick with prestigious. I don't know. Either way, it's a prestigious job to have, prestigious. Um, and so no one's going to fault you for having that job, right? But in my view, again, with my little, I guess, me being autistic about free software, I would say that I wouldn't do that because ultimately, like, you're kind of working for the cartel in that sense. Because I even had a buddy, which I'll obviously leave unnamed, that worked with like ads on Meta's platforms. And their job, quite literally, again, this is, again, being as a cynical abstraction of their job, is to figure out ways to take more of so somebody that is addicted to gambling, and in this case, it's like addicted to Facebook games. How do I get more of their paycheck? That is precisely what they were hired to do, and that's what they do with the algorithms. They figure out how to make it more addicting because it improves Meta's bottom line. So as a business, there's nothing. And if you view everything through this like I guess soulless business lens, like what they're doing is great because it helps stakeholders, it grows the business. But ethically, again, you're wreaking havoc on people's lives. That, yeah, sure, you don't see, and it's their own fault because they're addicted to gambling. But like, then we're going to punish anyone who has any vice ever. People all have vices, and and of course, like maybe you can judge somebody who you think has vices that are worse than yours. So, for example, like if you're I don't know, if you're addicted to sugar and caffeine, which again are two highly, highly acceptable vices to have. Nobody is going to say anything if you're addicted to sugar or caffeine. In fact, most people are, and it is seen as completely normal and healthy, which is not, but it's fine. That's the way it's seen. And no one's going to bat an eye about that. But of course, if your vice is methamphetamine or heroin, obviously things you're perceived a bit differently, we'll say. And people don't really take kindly to people that are addicted to those. They think they're, scum or whatever. Uh, which again, they have some kind of point they have some point because I would argue that, methamphetamine is probably a little bit worse than caffeine and sugar. But at the end of the day, it's like a vice is a vice and you're still comparing vices. So in the case of the guy working at Facebook, screwing over the gambler, gambling is this guy's vice. And then you're simply going to say it's worse because, well, fine, I'm a methamphetamine addict that works at Google, and my job is to steal more money from the gambling addict that, it works at a construction site. It's like, all right, well, again, if you phrase it like that, it doesn't sound like either one is doing that great. Uh, but in the eyes of society, one person is like, wow, what a genius. Like, AI researcher at Google, he must be so smart. And then the other guy's like, well, what a piece of shit, wasting his money gambling away. When in the reality of things, they're not that much different, really. They're both people that are controlled and have vices that are not good for them, and but yet one is being rewarded, healthily by society, both financially and through, I guess, moral rewards of being, you're an acceptable person, good job on your employment. And the other person is again getting screwed over more just because they have a different vice. Um, which again, I mean, I'm not saying we can't like everything has to be communist and fair, and every vice like has to be treated equally. Obviously, I think there are differences, but um, viewing them as two totally, completely different lenses, I think, is being reductive to the reality of the situation, which is that one person is not that much different than the other. Because people kind of forget that. I think people, especially if someone that has accrued power or prestige or wisdom or whatever, you kind of like start to feel better than people, which, I understand that does happen sometimes. But I think it is important that you don't forget that you're like people are all kind of the same, really, at the end of it all. Like there's not that much differences between people. Because as I was, this is kind of off topic, but it's I guess somewhat related. So I was playing basketball today, like I said, and if you ever watched children play any sport, and this is mostly children, I would say, I don't know, maybe uh, under 12, I would say is probably a decent age range to specify. But it's a very peculiar way to play because if you watch like, and I'll use basketball as the example because it's easy and that's what I was playing today. But if you watch NBA basketball or even college basketball or high school basketball, there's passing. The communication is mostly like coherent. They're calling out plays. There's defensive call outs or calling out screens and whatever. Whereas when children play, whoever has the ball, you just shout their name. So if a person named Justin has the ball, there are four other people on their team shouting out Justin. And defense is mostly clueless, but it's pretty much whoever has the ball, whoever's in the middle of the action, give it to me. I want the ball. It's like it's a completely selfish way to play any sport, and like any real coach would be like, guys, quit yelling at the guy who has the ball for the ball. Like you're never going to get it that way. But that's just how they play, and it's like almost natural, across all languages and cultures that they just scream out for the person who has the ball to give it to them. Um, so that kind of made me think about, I guess, like selfishness and selflessness and how uh, it's a measure of, I'll say, even like civilization. Socialization might be a better, abstraction to frame it under. But inherently, the human, a child human, is a very, very selfish creature and does everything completely selfishly. And then it's selflessness that is kind of taught into them, meaning that like we have to show them that if you scratch other people's backs, eventually it will, you'll scratch your back scratch. So it's like the reciprocal nature of society. Um, and this is even understood, I would say, in even like quote unquote pre-civilized societies. So for example, like hunter gatherers, noticeably I always love that they would talk lowly of the other's meat. So like not their genitals, but their the meat that they would catch. So like hunter gatherers would go out and catch food. The young like teenagers or whatever that would go hunt with them, the elders would always talk about how bad their meat was, and it wasn't because their meat was actually bad, and maybe they were really really talented hunters, but it was only just to keep their ego in check, so that when the day came where well, just like the society is built on, you know, when you need things, when there's surplus, like we'll all share, and when it's scarce, we'll all share too. It's like we'll kind of ride the highs and the lows together, um, and that's kind of built into their, social structure. So that's like the example is they would always talk low of their, of the teenagers' meat or whatever. So in the same vein, I just thought that it was just interesting to see kids playing basketball. It's like, well, they have to learn that, like, again, being selfish and just shouting out the other person is not how you play the game. Because any good player is not just, no one's just screaming at LeBron, "Hey, give me the ball, give me the goal, give me the ball." Or even if you are like maybe de facto the best player, it doesn't make sense for you to have the ball all the time because then you just, get double teamed and you're never going to score. So there's obviously like a certain amount of reciprocity with it. It's like, okay, this person's hot. I assume that when I'm, heating up, they'll, hook me up too or whatever. So it's just kind of that same implicit agreement. And that again, that I think that is a mark of, I'll say, like even a civilized man. So in that regard, the quote unquote savage who just, lives and, is naked and hunts boar or whatever, is in many ways civilized too because of their selflessness. Whereas I think it's a mark of being uncivilized if you're, just purely driven by this like competition, biological need. And that's kind of where I saw it originate, was that I think, because even what society does is kind of tone down a lot of these like biological imperatives that we have about like breeding and again being selfish. Because biologically, like to survive, it would make, I guess it would make some sense to me from just run around and eat whatever I found, steal things, rape people, and that would be like biologically the smart thing because I would reproduce, and that's like that would win. I'd win the competition to do that. But obviously, like not only would I face societal consequences for being just a complete menace, because that's just not how you do things. But it also, I think it's also a weaker imperative than perhaps the more civilized like reciprocity with it. That's part of the reason our evolution has worked, because there was this. It wasn't even a biological development; it was our social development. Because as we developed into these groups that would hunt and do things together, we socially evolved to say, okay, well, there's kind of this social code, right? Where, if you catch meat, you share it, and then that way you don't catch meat, like we'll share it with everybody. And that even I think is, again, I would argue it is done more good for us than even our biological like developments, because biologically we're not even that great. We can like throw stuff, and we have, the bipedal movement's nice, and the fingers and the thumbs are cool, but like we get our ass kicked by a gorilla. We can't swim really. We can't breathe water. We have, we suck in air all the time. It's not like our lungs are that big. I guess our brains are cool, but again, that's kind of like that's really the only thing evolution gave us. But I think what it did give us was this like, or, at least what maybe it wasn't even evolution. It was just kind of happenstance that we developed these social groups that would, were way more effective to survive than like being this selfish loser who's running around raping people. Which again is what biology tells you to do, is run around, eat whatever you can, sleep, have sex, and eat. Pretty much that's pretty much all that like our bodies are telling us to do all the time. And anyone with half a brain would tell you that that isn't the most prudent thing to be doing. Not only for like the survival of your own gene, but even just like for the survival of our species altogether, and yourself, right? Because you're not going to last that long, at least on the modern planet, running around, being a rapist. That's just not how. That's just not going to work. People aren't going to put up for that. I think the legal system will actually do its job then, and put you away. Rightfully so. Either way, I just thought it was interesting that with children, it even seems that we still kind of have to beat that biological impulse out of them to just be, again, what would otherwise be, overweight serial rapists, and cereal, the breakfast cereal rapists as well, ironically, just because we'd assume they just eat everything all the time. So there's just, I don't know. It's not that I realize that I always come across as a very like anti-society person, and someone that isn't very very high on a lot of what society does. But I do think that there is obviously a huge need to for that, just for the survival of our species in general. There is, again, some basis of what socialization needs to occur, such that there is kind of a social code that is upkept with people. And again, what the specifics and nuances of that code are, again, what rightfully debated and whatnot. But I think I don't ever want it to seem like I'm vying for the complete abolition of all of that, because I do see its value, and it's present, again, most obvious, I think, if you're watching 11-year-olds play basketball, because it's infuriating. It's like, you guys, not only is your team not going to win if you're just screaming at the guy with the ball, but you're a bad teammate, and you're not even a good individual player, because you're doing nothing if you don't have the ball. All you're doing is just, putting your hands to your mouth and shouting at the person with the ball. Who's then going to take this like miracle long bomb three, bank it off the backboard, and then like, run back and play fake defense. It's kind of, it's kind of just how that game goes. Um, I don't know. I just thought it was a little mildly interesting to me. I'm gonna get some water here. All right. This is maybe a tad on the political side of things, but I'm gonna do it anyway and just see how it goes. Um, so they talk about this. I'm just saying, is like this hypothetical person. So don't read too much into that. there's chatter. Fine, I'll say that. There's always talk about just like pendulum swingings, meaning that things. I guess in America it would start with liberal and conservative, and they kind of swing from one side to the other, and we see like different waves of liberalism versus conservatism. So we have like even just in the last, I would say 50 or 60 years, there was like the whole Woodstock craze of the left, and that was like this big, everyone's a Marxist and a communist all of a sudden, and there was like I don't know if it was like this reactionary Reagans or maybe this more fiscally conservative people that won out, and then there was just kind of this wave of like everyone's an investor and you got to like be in the stock market or whatever. Um, and now we're kind of an interesting phase where I do. If not asking me where I align ideologically, because I don't give myself labels like that, but I do think that this kind of more conservative red wave will, I think, win out the next 10 or 20 years. Because I think a lot of especially with this idea of progress, which I think is supposedly this ideology of, I guess people on the left, or I don't know what you call them, liberals or leftists or whatever. But this idea of progress, I've been very critical of, because I don't think enough questions are being asked about what progress even is, right? Like if progress is, instead of me, just paying for a burger with cash, I have to sign up for an app that collects my data to sell to advertisers to buy a less nutritious burger for quadruple the price, off of kiosk, and there's not even anyone working, and not even anyone that is, I guess, I'm even giving the money to, and it's a robot that makes the burger in the first place. So it's like, who's even getting this money for this low quality experience? Like, if to me, if that is what really progress represents, is like a McDonald's kiosk, then go back. Okay, then like I can firmly say that I'm not in this progress. All progress is good progress ideology, and that doesn't ever mean that I'm disavowing kind of more obvious forms of quote unquote progress. But because people like, that's the example I get is like I'll say something like, oh, like data privacy is a nightmare, as all this technology is making us these impotent losers who don't know anything and dependent on things, and talk about the difficult or the problems of social media, and I'll belabor all these points, and then they're like, well, what about these new like brain cancer treatments for children? Like, do you hate brain cancer? Do you want to kill children? And I said, no. Okay, is it possible that we could have one of these ideas of progress without the other? And even so, like, fine, is saving Jimmy's brain cancer, one child named Jimmy, sorry, Jimmy, is that worth the destruction of entire centuries of of human societal progress and turning billions of people into coomers, right? Fine, it is. I will say the horrible thing and say that Jimmy dying of brain cancer might be worth saving the rest of society. You ever heard of Jesus? Wasn't that his whole shtick? Was that he saved himself for maybe Jesus is just Jimmy with brain cancer, and he was the person who sacrificed himself so that no one would be a coomer for the next 10 millenniums. Um, because that's ultimately like what the trade off is. It's like, fine, you cherry pick one example of like a medical technology saving somebody's life, and you use that to justify like the existence of Pornhub and Instagram and DoorDash and all this other horrible dystopian tech that is ruining people's lives. People also like love to defend these things, and act like there is like it doesn't, like the problems just don't exist, or are like overinflated. They're not, they're not real problems, which I always push back against, because I don't know, and it's always the person has their own arguments for things. I was arguing about someone the other day, and I was telling them that, well, if these algorithms are very very good at predicting your behavior and showing you things that you like, how far away theoretically could they be from then controlling your behavior, or maybe kind of telling you what you like, or nudging you to get you to like something or buy something? And they talked about how they would buy stuff off the TikTok. I mean, yeah, sure, they'd probably save $100 to $200 a month if they didn't buy things off the TikTok shop. Which, again, they didn't see as a problem at all. They're like, "Well, I have free will, and I can just decide not to buy something." I was like, "Sure, I understand you maybe have decided not to buy something in the past, but in general, you're still wasting $100 to $200 a month on the TikTok shop. Do you not see a problem with this? How is this just totally okay, excusable behavior in your eyes? There isn't anything problem." And it's like, well, I have free will. And it's like, that isn't free will. I don't. Do you even, can you define what free will is? What does free will mean to you? I don't think that doesn't sound very free will to me, right? And at what point does it not become free will? Suppose that. you exercising free will allows you to save $4 on the TikTok shop because you decided not to buy, a bottle of, I don't know, red ketchup or something, or orange ketchup or some, I don't know, some weird sauce or something. I don't know. I'm just making something up. So whatever crap people buy on TikTok shop, I don't know. I've never been on it. That is that exercising your free will, but the other $280 that you spent that month isn't. That was playing into the algorithm's hands, or was all that free will, and you just decided to be a degenerate? And is that okay, really? Then at that point, right? And it's like, well, it's like, well, I'm a methamphetamine addict who does nothing but jerk off to porn and say racial slurs online, but I have free will. It's like, okay, well, I'm not saying you don't, but at some point maybe there's influences on your behavior that aren't pushing you in the right direction. And I'm not to say that what is the wrong or the right direction, but there's probably activities and habits that you have, or vices in this case, that maybe I would say are the wrong direction, right? Can we say that people overdosing on heroin is the wrong direction? Okay, great. Now let's work back from there. Next, $300 a month on the TikTok shop. Is that the wrong direction? Again, I would say yes. So again, if that is what is, if TikTok's algorithm is strong enough to compel you to spend that amount of money on the shop every month, maybe it is a little bit more controlling than you give it credit, right? And it isn't something worth being dismissive of. And again, and then if you want to bring in the brain cancer example, how many how many $300 a month times however many billion people are on the shop or wasting their money, is it worth the one Jimmy brain cancer? I don't know. Maybe I think Jimmy should just be the next incarnation of Jesus and sacrifice himself, say, okay, I don't need the new brain cancer treatment. Let's just abolish LinkedIn. And maybe I honestly think society might be better, right? And insurance companies do this all the time, right? That it's always like, well, I think they basically bet against you dying or living or whatever, to give you horrible rates on something. It's all just to screw you over, really, at the end of the day. But regardless, there's a lot of math that goes into like how many car accidents are worth, this premium on something. Again, but I think to an ideology where it's any kind of bad thing is horrible, and there's no amount of suffering there's no comparing like um, bad things are bad things and we should avoid them at all costs. It's like, well, again, at some point, even somebody's life might be worth, 100 people's lives. Is it even worth, even like from a utilitarian lens, is that fair to say? Can Jimmy even sacrifice himself? And because even like the Hippocratic Oath is like, I don't even know what it is. I probably should have looked it up. But it's like you don't do harm to something, or like, if you can save their life, you can, or something like that. But in a lot of cases, I think there's some, honor to just dying with humility, right? And maybe even sacrificing yourself in some sense. And that's what the military is. People view it as that, which there's a whole other argument with the military and people dying. But again, viewed as, if you die in the military, viewed as a sacrifice to other people. Again, many, even themselves, would say that it's worth it. It's not worth saving every single life everywhere. Now, again, I have plenty of qualms with the whole idea of the military in general. And I don't necessarily think that like it's like, the best uses of, humans in general to be fighting each other and killing each other. There's probably other ways that we've evolved past, again, mutant warfare, right? But I understand there's a whole economic imperative with keeping, the military industrial complex alive and whatever. Um, I don't like any of that shit, but that, is neither here nor there. Anyway, it's still seen as like a okay and a prudent sacrifice to die in the military because it's a sacrifice for other people. So, in the same sense, maybe there's less progress, technologically or medically, in exchange for saving people from, the horrible atrocities of the next new, short form brain rot app, right? Think about how many children's educations has been ruined because of the internet. And again, it's not to bash on the internet itself as a abstraction or as a creation or as an invention. Simply, we've just lost the ability to adequately apply nuance to using said technologies. So again, it isn't necessarily the technology itself is this like horrible, evil thing that we must vanquish, but it's simply that, again, perhaps we didn't apply the level of nuance and scrutiny necessary. And again, I don't know what level at which this happens. Maybe it's at the legal level. I would argue against that only because it, is a slippery slope. But I think it's mostly at the social level where it's like parents and peers of kids allow horrendous behavior to continue, partially out of ignorance, partially out of, again, kind of weird fantasies about how everything is better now and it'll always get better and there's no such thing as history's gone. There's no such thing as bad things repeating themselves. Rome fell, but we can't, surely, which again I'll think is bogus. I think that is more of the true problem with all of the this proliferation of all this crap technology and what it's done to kids and people. Because it's one thing to like blame the education system, but ultimately it's like made up of idiots that let their the teachers that let their kids even run around on the iPads and do horrible things, and uh, I just aren't being responsible with it. Because even like the kids, the parents that talk about how bad technology is, they still like none of them cancel their Netflix subscription. None of them actually do anything that would require like effort from them because they have it so easy, right? And maybe this is part of like a boomer bashing thing where it's like, they're like, well, these damn kids are they're so lazy, addicted to phones, and like name any boomer, they all spend more time on their like they spend just as much time as these coomer kids running around, and you're shocked why it's like it's like a fat mom. It's like, why are my kids fat? It's like, how did you get fat, right? I mean, what do you mean? Why? How are your kids fat? You fed them, you idiot. What do you mean? It's like it's a mystery. We're gonna blame McDonald's. I'm gonna sue McDonald's because my kid's fat. It's like you brought them there. They can't drive. You drove them there. You paid. They can't even have any money. They paid for the food, right? It's like or like you paid for the food for them to get fat, and you're wondering like you're mad at McDonald's because of fat. And like, yes, I can blame McDonald's as well, but at a certain point, there's also blame to put on the individual people themselves. Um, and again, there's this fine line between like individual responsibility and then like corporation accountability, right? And I'm constantly stuck between those two extremes where I'm not going to ever absolve McDonald's for selling a McGriddle or a pancake with maple syrup and bacon, egg and cheese sandwich, which again should be illegal to sell that. So I'm not saying that it's okay that they sell that, but at the same time, people shouldn't buy that, right? Don't buy it. That's like it shouldn't exist. Like even if it does exist, it doesn't mean that it needs to have a ton of people buying it. And it's ironically always the dumbest shit that people like buy in mass and have like hordes of this again, absolutely horrible stuff that just should be completely illegal. It's like people are for selling atomic bombs. It's like, yes, they obviously shouldn't be selling that, and people shouldn't be buying it. So it's like I don't even know who to blame anymore, right? Because it's like you guys both suck. You understand? Both the families that allow this behavior and they buy the McGriddle or whatever for their kids, or the people that buy the atomic bombs, and the people that make them. Like A, don't make it, and B, don't buy it. Um, but we lose on both ends. They're both allowed to sell it, and they love selling it, and they love buying it, right? They love spending $300 on a TikTok shop, which again should be illegal, or again illegal. I just use as a figure of speech almost to say that it shouldn't be done, right? It just like strongly, strongly shouldn't be done. And if it was if I was a dictator of some kind and I could uh, forcibly make people to do stuff, I would make them not do that. Now, I wouldn't ever want to be a dictator because it's just not my. I just don't think it's necessarily a great way to govern things. Um, Maybe a monarch might be a little bit of different flavor of dictator that might be more amenable, because there were good monarchs actually, and which I realize is a heretical thing to say, as I guess the living in the patron time of democracy, where democracy is the one and only true thing, and everything's perfect with democracy. There were actually some decent monarchs who, again, just like it wasn't that like there was any. It was just like, okay, well, I think this is right, and I think this is wrong. Therefore, I'm making it illegal for this to be right and that to be wrong. So there you go. Deal with it. And people were like, well, what do you have? And they're like, well, I have the divine right or whatever. But it worked, and people kind of did that. And in a lot of ways, it wasn't even that bad, right? But if I was a dictator, I would apply a lot of these changes on a societal level and hopefully adjust behavior in a direction I think is more amenable to long-term human flourishing. Because I realize that there's also all kinds of arguments you could have about the short-term viability of certain changes. So let's say I ban, in one fell swoop, LinkedIn, Facebook, Google, like I ban all this stuff. All these critical technologies go down. Nobody can find a job because there's no LinkedIn. It's like the irony is no one was finding a job on LinkedIn before anyway. Like no one has ever found a job on LinkedIn. I would hire somebody if, they actually, I would give them $1,000 if they legitimately found any kind of job on LinkedIn. There wasn't through some gimmicky bullshit or what. No one's ever found a job on Indeed or any of that crap. It's all fucking bullshit. Anyway, if I banned all of that, all this critical infrastructure would fall, like society with all these problems, these short-term economic issues. But I would think in the long term, like those things should have never existed. So it's almost like a necessary recorrection for, me to ban them. And B, in the long term, I think things will be better if LinkedIn isn't the way that you find a job, or if ordering a burger doesn't require logging into a Google account that's connected to your McDonald's profile that you then have to scan at the drive-through because you need to authenticate who you are buying a burger. It's like this is fucking ridiculous. I can stop buying burgers, and B, quit putting all this spyware, bloatware crap everywhere and anywhere that you can stick it in. It's ridiculous. I think in the long term, it would be better if those technologies were banned. But there are always short term arguments against such things, the impracticality, whether it's an economic impracticality, where it's like you tank the economy and the economy would be bad, the stock market would go down. And part of me is like, I kind of hope the economy shits is bad for a while, because like not to say that I'm like protected, because I probably suffer just as much as anyone else. But I think there almost is some necessary suffering to be had on the Western societal level in general. I think that we've kind of bathed in this kind of fake, like everything's going to be perfect, the world is whatever, for a while, and it's time to, again, for some chemotherapy. As I said before, I think the American economy is largely it's these growth of different cancers in different parts that all result in people getting fucked over more. So some chemotherapy might be good to kind of rid ourselves of that junk. But anyway, I'll move on to something else here. Anyway, I started this whole thing that's like 20 minutes ago with saying that I think there will be a kind of more conservative backlash over the next 10 to 20 years. I don't think that I think more and more people are going to be skeptical of this notion of progress and how perfect and like undeniable that it is. Because ultimately, I'm not convinced that progress is undeniable. There's many progresses which I could say this is definitively not progress. It is new. It has not existed before. But does that mean it is progress? No. It's like, yeah, and again, I will have to sacrifice one Jimmy for this quote unquote progress. But I think there's just literally no nuance applied to progress right now. There's no measuring stick to go, hey, maybe this is dumb. We shouldn't do this. It's just full throttle all the time with everything. Grocery stores, everything's self checkout. There's not a single fucking grocery store clerk left in fucking America. It's a complete sham. And it's like, is that a good thing? Again, I would argue no. And is it like, is it a job that could be automatable? Of course. And but again, I just think there's, just because you can automate something at 60% of the capacity, we should question how important or relevant or necessary that last 40% is. And maybe a grocery store clerk is a bad example, because there are probably some pretty good arguments to say we shouldn't ever need any of those. But given the shortage of jobs, period, I think it's fine to have a simply head-faced teenager work a fucking grocery store clerk for a summer, right? Like, my dad fucking did that and made enough money to pay for college that way, which is a fucking joke. Not to say we should be paying them $85,000 a year, but I don't think it's the worst thing to have some jobs that, again, are kind of menial, trivial, but like not really that pointless, because you get to work with people and it's not that bad. I really don't think a grocery store clerk is really the worst thing in the world. You deal with people, you put things in bags, you're kind of handling items, you're on your feet, you're doing things. And of course, it could be bad. I'm not saying we should put one person at the head of a 40,000 square foot McDonald's or a Walmart and just make them grind all day. But again, working with people, saying hello, how are you, paper or plastic or whatever, that's not really that bad of a thing to do for a few hours a day. Maybe it's not a full time gig, or again, it should be for teenagers or people, or kids or something. Maybe not that kids should be working, but you know what I mean. Lower skill employees. But it's not the worst thing in the world that is something that people should be doing. Now, like a toll booth, on the other hand, again, it's similar to, is much different in my opinion than a grocery store clerk, because you literally are doing nothing. You're not accomplishing anything by working at the toll booth, like for society. Whereas like the grocery store clerk is, at the very least, still like putting items in bags and answering questions or making sure that everything was satisfactory, or cleaning even between checking people out. I think all these things are kind of things that have to be done by somebody and are necessary, to, to keep the cleanliness of the grocery store up and keep that kind of functioning. We need humans in there. Whereas a toll booth is all you're doing is you put up a tent to take people's money just to let them keep driving on the road that's already there. It's not even like even pay it pays for the people to sit there. And probably a little bit extra for whoever owns the road. But is that really is that really the greatest application of our human faculties? Is like the culmination of all of our technology and our society has produced somebody that sits in a tent and steals your money. Right? I mean, what the hell is this? This just doesn't seem, even just conceptually, does not seem thought through. I mean, what is this? It's silly, in my opinion. Um, but I don't know. Uh, yeah, either way, I don't know. I think that people will continually or will increasingly question the notion of never-ending progress that I think is that at least I kind of feel is being shoved down people's throats. Like things are getting better, everything's perfect. There's no such thing as like the end of America. It just can't happen because it's we're great. Or that like we're terrible and it's already over or something. I don't know. There's extremes on both sides of these, but I do think there will be kind of a winning, I'll say, conservative push the next 10, 20 years. And then it'll rebound again. We'll see kind of a new, maybe like a communist part 10 or something where uh, there's kind of a new kind of communism that hasn't been tried yet, of course, because it never has, obviously. And, it'll have some other, weird thing that'll make it perfect. And we should be doing that instead. And there'll be more, progress that way. Or it'll be the end of everything. And we'll just it'll be nuclear Armageddon. And then there's no need for any of this because it's all over. Maybe that's the goal anyway, or we'll be on Mars or something. But yeah, again, the obsession with Mars makes no fucking sense to me. We have a planet that is perfectly suited for us to live on. Why are we going to, because even like I watched Interstellar, this is like a year ago, probably at this point, and I was just baffled because I'm like, why are they? And I realized why they were doing that because there was whole like the society was collapsing or whatever, and there was all these problems, and they had to like, why send the humans out there to do that? Like, why send the meat bags when could nobody rig up a computer to do like with a camera to sit on the spaceship and do that instead? Why send the human out there, right? I realize there's like all these time constraints. I'm sure somebody who's some nerd with the interstellar lore will tell me that, well, there's this all these factors that come into play. Fine. But put interstellar aside. If we're going to if we're going to experiment with space travel and do all these things and send things and objects to Mars or different planets, why are we doing that with easily the most fragile thing that I can think of, which is a human, which is a bag of meat that is not meant to be in outer space? Like if you were to design something besides like a pit with, I don't know, I mean, because there's nothing even less livable than outer space. There's no air. You immediately die. Like I would say, like a pit of snakes with like fire and a bunch of gorillas down there would be more dangerous. It's honestly not because you would at least like have a few moments of fear and you'd maybe get a shot on the snake or you'd kick the gorilla on the balls or something. But and then of course, you get torn to shreds. But in outer space, you'd literally just die literally almost immediately because there's no air, there's nothing anywhere, there's no food or such, there's no water, there's nothing. There's not even like a breeze out there. There's literally nothing. It's a vacuum. Why are we sending people out there to like on dangerous things? Like we should only send people out there like we do to the ISS or the moon, or the moon was even kind of a little risky. But at least at that point, I think we were sure enough. Like, all right, we've sent enough crap out there to know it's safe. It'll be all right. And it's kind of like a conquest thing. It's pretty close. And maybe it's the same thing with Mars, but I feel like we're a little too gung ho on going to Mars and sending people over there when we're just so clearly not designed for that environment. And of course, something horrible is going to happen. And of course, thousands of people are going to die. And of course, I'm going to be right because it seems like I am on some of these things. But no one's going to care because it's like we're moving forward. Like towards what? I mean, we have a planet that is awesome for our little, again, comparatively, compared to outer space or Mars. There's food, there's water all over the place, and there's all stuff that we need to survive with our little meat sacks. And yet we're like so gung ho on leaving to go to Mars that is a fucking desert with no water or anything. Even if there's water, it's fucking two drops. Come on, there's nothing out there. Uh, I don't know. It just seems silly that like we're obsessed with this space travel. And it kind of strikes me as this, I don't know, silly thing where it's like you're so worried about going to someone else's house when it's like you can't even clean your room. So I think we should maybe this is more like an environmentalist. I suppose I'm kind of sounding like an environmentalist right now, but I think we should at least pay more attention to the perfectly suited planet that we have currently right now, versus being gung ho about we have to live on the other planet because it's like because it's cool. It's like I don't care. It's cool. You're an idiot for doing that. Like it's just not practical. Even from whatever math you want to slice it, we have a fine planet that we should probably worry more about that than the planet that is however many miles away. It doesn't make any sense, especially about shipping ourselves over there. Why? Why bother? Send the machines over there for long enough. At least build us something over there, and then maybe we'll go over. But I don't know. It's not a very popular opinion, I suppose. I guess it probably is popular. I think it'll be increasingly popular. People questioning why the fuck we're doing some of this stuff. It's like, well, we can put an AI chip that will, read you the lyrics to your songs while you're listening to it in your brain. It's like, okay, this is like a gimmick and it's cool and like a movie or something, but we don't actually need this. This is pointless. We shouldn't be doing this. This is stupid. And the problems that could happen as because of these dumb brain chips is like way far beyond what the actual benefit that we'd accrue. It's like, what is this use case of, Siri or like who actually can use Siri to get anything done, right? Just pick up the fucking a piece of paper and write your grocery list down. Quit barking at your phone to get to put death. We have pencil and paper. We've had that for thousands of years. The Egyptians were writing on fucking bamboo or papyrus or whatever, and you have to bark into your phone to put, gobstoppers on your fucking grocery list. Put it down. Write it down. What is wrong with writing it down? Are you really that busy? You don't have anything going on. There's no way you're that busy that you have to use this hands-free technology. I mean, even I'd almost rather have people texting and driving. At least they're writing their fucking grocery list down, than everybody and their mother, using Siri to, propose to people. I mean, it's fucking insane. All right. Of course, I'm getting all worked up right towards the end here, but anyway, thanks for watching. Peace out.